Keith, thank you very much for joining me. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
Fantastic. So let's get straight into it. So VAR, it's been in the Premier League for about 5 years now, since 2019. Enough time, I'd say, to assess how it's been going so far, which leads me to my first question. In what ways do you think VAR has had a positive impact on the game?
You'll see that I'm struggling for an answer. I think the balance is that there are too many negatives than actual positives. I'm sure on the odd occasion, through the system, they've rectified an error by the referee. And I don't want to discard those. There are several of those, but I have worries about the reasoning behind them. So let's just open up by me telling you where I come from with regard to technology. I'm very pro the use of technology. And I back that up by the fact that I was the guy that introduced the communication kits that enable the referee, the fourth official, and his two assistants to, on a open mic, be able to communicate with each other, and that enhanced the quality of decision making and created, if you like, a team effort within that process. The second bit was I was at Old Trafford when Roy Carroll, the Manchester United goalkeeper, dropped the ball over the line. A goal was not given, and the reasoning is that the referee was in the other half of the field of play because there'd been a clearance. The assistant referee was well upfield, so the active officials, had no chance of determining whether that ball was over the line or not. But I could see, I was in an elevated seat, and I went to the Premier League and said, right, this is what we want. We want goal line technology. They supported that call. And then I was heavily involved with Paul Hawkins, Mike Foster of the Premier League, a director, in order to secure a product that delivered for the referee. And the sort of journey of that was, how quick can you get a decision? And in that process, we changed the speed of the cameras to 500 frames per second. We increased the number of cameras around each goal to 7. And we increased the requirement on Hawkeye to produce a very accurate and very quick decision. And I think they probably had a couple of bleeps in thousands of games where Hawkeye and goal line technology have been in operation. So that it's on that foundation that we now move to VAR. And yes, they've had it 5 years, but I think you've got to look at the first 2 years, because I thought there were wobbles in that way in which they operated it. In that first year, they had pitch side monitors available, never used them. In year 2, coming under pressure, Mike Riley, the boss of the PGMOL, said, right, we're going to use those sparingly. So there was a little bit of a nudge and a reminder through media pressure, hey, what are these monitors for if you're not using them? And so he said, we're going to use them sparingly. And out of 380 games, which is a full program of the Premier League in that year 2, they went to the monitor 3 times. And of course, we know that when referees go to monitor, they change that initial decision and almost capitulate. Now, why is that? I think that there is potentially a relationship problem between the VAR, who could be a subordinate by way of experience in refereeing terms, because you've got a referee doing the job on a Saturday, and that referee then travels to Stockley Park, West London, wherever he's refereeing, and then sits in a chair and watches a match. My belief is that if we're going to get an improvement, that role needs to be full-time and needs to be a specialist, accountable, and continuous training. And they will then get better outcomes. How do I know that? Because that is what they do at the World Cup. When a World Cup comes round, they appoint a specialist panel of operators, train them, and use the very best. And that's what we should be doing. So that's that aspect to it. So I think that the impact has also been the other way, and that is we've seen referees who, like that safety net of a tightrope walker, it doesn't matter if he falls off, makes an error, the safety net's going to catch him. If he's got no safety net, he's going to make the decision to stride one step further with care, with attention, and with full concentration. The reality is that I think it's impacted on many referees' performances because there's almost been a lack of concentration and almost, don't worry, there's a life belt in Stockley Park that's going to be thrown to help me in the refereeing process. Now, so I think there's, with some decisions in law, there's subjectivity. And VAR and referee might not agree. So for me, I think that VAR ought to be the other way, a bit driven by the referee in some instances, where a referee's made a call, he may have some doubts in his mind and he wants a second look. But that's not the case at the moment with the criteria. And then we come to probably one of the most contentious issues around VAR, and that is offside. Now, go back to the cameras at 700 frames per second to get a level of accuracy. I've only got one datum point. I'm looking at it from 7 different angles to determine the ball's crossed the line, and I'm using software to achieve that result. When we come to the cameras used by VAR on offside, they are broadcast speed cameras. They're not 500 frames per second. And we have 2 datum points, which further complicate it. The point at which the ball is kicked, and is that player, when that point of the ball being passed forward, is that player standing in an offside position? That's what automatic, semi-automatic, automated offside system does. It still requires input from the assistant, but it gives you accuracy or greater accuracy on the position of the player. The match official has then got to determine, is he active? Is he seeking to gain an advantage? Or has he gained an advantage when the ball comes back? So I think that system for me is not as accurate as it could be. And when it's not as accurate as it could be, and it's making toenail decisions, that's a media phrase, then that you've got a problem.
Yeah, and it is a good point you've made in terms of at the World Cup and also in the Champions League. It seems to be used more efficiently and effectively with regards to the offside calls and automated offsides. There's been a lot of talk of that, and I think there might be something to do with the ball with regards to the Premier League and the technology isn't there
Correct.
with the Nike ball. So that's hopefully something we'll see.
I think usually in many situations, shared technology, although it's a very competitive industry, but Adidas have actually produced that ball, or someone else for Adidas. It's not beyond the wit of man for Nike, a world-class business, to have a look at that, or even other suppliers like Macron that's growing in space of those two. So I think that, look, I don't think that should be a closer to whose system it is. The Premier League is the best league in the world. We're constantly told that. I believe that. Therefore, with the amount of money that's invested and involved, we should have the very best system.
Yeah, and you've probably mentioned some of these already, but on the flip side of my question with regards to the positives, what are the negatives? I'm sure you've got a list. What would you say are the key negative impact, the key negatives that VAR has had on the game?
I think that it's impacted on fans, and it's also impacted on players and managers. I think if we look at players and managers, I think it's impacted on the confidence that they have in the match officials, because they've continued to question the decision, and it's almost like the stopping of enjoyment in relation to them being able to celebrate a goal. It's impacted in that way. For the fan, it's completely impacted in a negative manner. You have a fan stood in a stadium, maybe standing there for 2-3 minutes. He's got a screen in front of him, and yeah, I suppose the heart rate for some is racing a bit because of, is it a goal, is it not a goal? But in reality, I think that I'm very much for a system of taking what rugby does with a big screen, with a referee and his two colleagues being able to have their on-field discussion with VAR, and everything is listened to in relation to the decision. And I think then, this is a little bit like going to the cinema, and you get to an interesting point, and then the screen goes blank for 5 minutes, and your entertainment's been impaired. And at the elite level, the game is in the entertainment business.
Absolutely. I think most people would agree with that. There is obviously a lot of talk about the consistency from VAR. So, in your eyes, how do we gain that consistency that will improve the process?
I think the consistency comes with having the specialist panel, having training, and having accountability. This is about I think most coaches will tell you, they talk about 10,000 body mechanics and do it 10,000, you do it naturally. I think that if you're like any job, if you're specializing in an aspect of it, you become better. What we see, don't we? If we watch darts, and I don't, but if we watch darts, we see the outcome and we think, oh, he's good. He can hit the triple 20 regularly. The reason he does that is practice, practice, practice. He does it every day, 7 days a week, and then he's in the competitive environment. And this is how I think you test. I think that if you have a good simulator, and you watch F1 and how quickly they change a set of tires. That's through practice, and I think that's where we need to be with VAR in terms of decision making and consistency. It's always something that you strive for, and the only way you in a way you learn by error. No, that's sad, but if a referee is seen to make an error by way of a decision and VAR's not intervene, that then has to be examined in detail, discussed with the referee, discussed with the VAR, examined, and then an outcome determined. I don't mean punishment here. What can we learn from that error? And then that is shared with the remainder of the refereeing group and VAR team. And this is how you then get consistency with the individual, consistency with VAR, but consistency across the group of professional referees. And hopefully then you're developing and enabling a cadre of world-class match officials to be established for the Premier League. And I think at the moment we're not there.
Yeah, and you sort of touched on communication, and that is really important, you'd say, in order to get success. So, from what you've seen, is the communication from VAR good enough currently? And if not, how can the communication be improved from the VAR hub to the on-field referee?
I just like openness, and I I think that our referee and VAR work as a team. I think that, when I was boss of the PGMOL, I introduced the same two assistant referees with that referee. So in the case of Howard Webb, he had Mike Malarkey and Darren Cann. Every time Webb refereed, Malarkey and Cann was with him. And they went through to referee the World Cup final in Africa as a group, as a team. And teams perform better. If you look at an individual running 400 meters and the world record, and then you actually look at the 4x100, then you get a different result. So I think teamwork, if it's smooth and delivered accurately, then you've got better officiating. So you build up a sixth sense when you're working together, I think.
Yeah. So, and I'm interested to hear this actually. How would you have felt being a referee with VAR in place?
Yeah, I think it would have impacted. But I think that what you need as a referee, you need, ultimately at the end of the day, and we've had it on one or two occasions, I think, it's almost like saying to the VAR, get lost. I've seen it. I don't need your interference. Now, that's not arrogance. That's about teamwork that should come. I've got that. It's a penalty kick. It's nailed on. And it's almost saying, I don't need you to have a look, mate. I'm happy with what I've given. And then if VAR does intervene, I'm going to the screen and I'm still happy with what I've seen.
Yeah.
This is about, I mean, look, if you're captain of the ship, you don't want to run into a bridge, do you? I know that's a poor analogy at this time, but in reality, the team around you are the safeguards against error. And when we look at match officials, we've got a referee, two assistants, a fourth official, a VAR, an AVAR, and now we've got another role. We've got another in the FA Cup. We saw another role in VAR. How many do you want? I mean, if you're the chef, you don't want 5 people standing around telling you how much salt to put in. You should determine that through your experience.
Yeah.
So I think there are many
Yeah.
analogies that you can use. Ultimately, the captain, like the president, he makes the calls, and he has to make the calls on the information that he's got.
Yeah. And there is always that doubt that threads into the on-field referee. When you're being told to go to the screen, that automatically puts a seed of doubt in your mind, and that's
Yeah, and I think what refereeing's done is it's conditioned itself to go to the screen and say I'm going with a VAR operator, because look, that's the easy decision, providing your VAR is giving you the right call. But see, we look around subjectivity. We look at the variable interpretation of the handball law. Put 100 referees in a room, and they're not all going to agree 100% that the call is right. Some are going to say that's not handball for me, and some will say is. That's the guy who has to be the leader, has to determine what he's going to give, and he's got to give that decision honestly, and hopefully it'll not impact on his performance. But if the team don't perform well, then they shouldn't be out the following week. And that's not punishment, by the way. That is because that team needs some operational advice. Think of the referee who's had a big game. Every Premier League game is a big game. And he's in his own mind, he's unhappy with one or two of the decisions he's made. He's now got to get into a car and drive to Stockley Park to be a VAR at 12:30. He's still got that baggage with him.
yeah.
Sports science will tell you about recovery. And it's not just physical recovery, it's mental recovery. So I think those changes that I think this should make would help. But here's the real crux. Howard Webb has got to give leadership. And if he looks at his team that's not delivering as well as it could be, then just like the manager of a football team, if your coach is not securing you the wins, you're going to say bye-bye.
Mm. So do you think Howard Webb is doing enough in his role, or is that
No,
not the
I
case?
think I think I think Howard Webb was put in a difficult position, a failing organisation. That's why he was brought in, and he inherited a lot of members of staff, and he's been there a year, and only this week we've seen John Moss, the director of SG1, the referee for the Premier League, leaving his role. I think that's taken too long. I genuinely believe that the weakness of PGMOL. Okay, I didn't like its leader. I think that's public in the public domain. I didn't think that Mike Riley was the right choice. I was proven on that. I think that there are many members still of Mike Riley's team that I think Howard's got to move on. He's got to stamp his own style, his own authority, and he's then got to write a business plan and a direction of where he wants the refereeing in England to be. But it should start with the words, the PGMOL aim is to develop and deliver a cadre of world-class referees.
So, Keith, there's a theory that more injuries are happening now because of the amount of stoppages from VAR, especially in some games. What are your thoughts on this theory?
I think that I've heard from a specialist fitness guy working with a Premier League club that he thinks that the injuries sustained are actually coming from the amount of added time that's been played, which surprised me a little. I think that it's too early within the system to determine what the injuries are about, because it needs a detailed analysis, not just, one of the things about football is it's always battling perception, and it needs to deal in reality. And the reality is when you get the statistics that actually support or guide or advise, and it's those statistics that will give you a better answer. I've no doubt that when players are stood around for 5 minutes, it doesn't help. But then it would be easy for a coach to intervene and say, warm up, keep moving. So I think that if they believe that, then they should be a little bit better at coping with that change by introducing different formats on the field of play to ease the problem. There are too many stoppages in the game. We've got to recognise that, we've had a game last season, I think 45 minutes of actual playing time. The average playing time in a Premier League game is in the low 50s in terms of minutes. I think the added time we see 10 minutes and 14 minutes is on the decline rather than on that steep curve. It's one of these, let's introduce a plan, we're going to do something about it, and then it doesn't maintain it throughout the season. So for me, I have two answers to that. I'd like one. I think the first step is to have an independent timekeeper rather than a referee. I think take that away from the referee. I think then it might become slightly more efficient. But probably the big step that they'll be unlikely to take, because football is not about change dramatically. But for me, I think a stop clock that plays two periods of 30 minutes and it's only going when the game is actually moving, will impact on the players, impact on the teams, impact on tactics. You know, what we have got is we've got, and there's nothing new. I saw it often in Europe, and that is when a smaller team is playing a big club with a big reputation, then what they do is try to delay everything. The goal kicks are slower, the throw-ins are taking slower, the free kicks take longer, the goal kicks become a bit of a joke. And you know, there are laws. The law for 6 seconds, where the goalkeeper gains possession of the ball in his hands, is still there. When did you last see that applied? Because I tell you, it's got to be years, not months or weeks.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I want to touch on KMI, the Key Match Incidents panel. Have you had any experience with that, or do you have any thoughts or views on that?
Well, I mean, I operated within PGMOL, our coaching group, that would look at KMI decisions. These key moments that impact on the outcome of the game. They're the ones you don't want. And in fact, I can tell you that to support that, if a referee was wrong on a key match incident, the match assessor's marking scheme would mean that the maximum mark awarded to that referee out of 100 would be 59.
Right.
So you see where the pressure would apply to the referees to get the big decisions right. Is that a penalty kick? Is it a goal? Is it a red card? You know, this is what VAR is supposed to help them with to get greater levels of accuracy.
Yeah, no,
As
that
for an
does make
independent
sense.
panel, now I can get into that a bit more. I worry about the transparency of that panel. I worry about whether they've done, like Michael Oliver, 8 years of refereeing at grassroots level. You know, you don't ask a nurse to carry out an operation. That's down to the surgeon. So what we're asking here is the train conductor carrying a green flag to tell the train driver he's got something wrong. Let's say, yeah, by all means interrogate and discuss, but that shouldn't impact on the performance of the referee. The performance of the referee should be measured by experts that are referees and not players. They can help the process. Look, I'm saying this from a fairly strong base because when I took over the PGMOL, I introduced match observers. I went to the Premier League and said, look, we have match assessors. They're former referees. They're watching the technical aspect of the referee. I now want to introduce match observers. And you go, what? Yeah, I want you to have a panel of managers, ex-players, some administrators. They go to a game, they can listen to what the referee has to say pre-match, they can advise post-match, they can watch the game and they can see it from their expert eye as a former player or a manager. And then they can input a report, a detailed report. That's a SWOT analysis of that performance. Fine.
Yeah.
So when I talk about a key match incident panel, how does that operate? And what does it do? You know, it's easy to say you got that decision wrong. It's about interrogating why the referee got it wrong. How can it be avoided in the future? And you know, if you look at the process of refereeing, it's about see, recognize, think, and act. That's the process. And invariably, errors are made by referees because they're not in the ideal position or their viewing angle is blocked. That's when you hope the colleagues might come in and assist. That's when you hope, if there's a major error, KMI, VAR will intervene if it meets the current VAR criteria. It's common sense.
Mm.
But to sit there around a panel with, a player, why do players miss goals? Do we have a panel of referees to actually say, this is why I missed it?
Yeah,
I'm being
yeah.
cynical.
No, I did think that as well, to be honest. Because obviously you've got referees, they don't want to be driving home thinking that they've, made a mistake and they've got to live with that. But isn't that sort of life in a way? Like Erling Haaland, he's missed massive chances against Chelsea in their draw. He's got to drive home with that burden, but he's
Well,
got to,
look at the Welsh player that missed the penalty last night.
yeah, Dan James, yeah.
How do you think he feels? I mean, look, there are errors in games. It's about examining how those errors can be avoided in the future. I don't have a worry about a KMI panel if that's what they want. I just think it's made up of the wrong people.
Mm.
And then people say, it's policeman, policing, policeman, and all that. Well, referee knows the game, the rules of the game, laws of the game. Sorry, inside out. Sometimes players don't. I mean, I got asked the question by a top player 3 days ago: does the 6 second law still exist? By the way, he's an international goalkeeper.
Mm. Yeah. Moving on to sin bins.
Yeah.
Are you surprised by the backlash it's received, or did you expect
No,
better?
I think what we have to recognise is that we're dealing with two types of games here. It's one game under one umbrella. At grassroots level, right? You take a player off, it impacts in the team, and it works when the referee wants to use it, right? When you get to the professional game, the worry is that you're impacting on the entertainment. My 45 quid that I've come and watched to pay and watch two teams of 11 is impacted negatively by someone sitting off the field for 10 minutes. Now, the reality is that there's no doubt that a sin bin would act as a deterrent for the rest of the team, not the guy who's being punished because he's off for 10 minutes. But it's not only is it a team punishment, a player punishment sanction, it's a team sanction as well. And this is why FIFA and the FA were talking about it. But the backlash from England has been so big, they binned it.
Mm.
The
The blue card.
IFAB, they have no intention of introducing it.
Yeah. What, even the sin bin? They're not they're not planning on introducing any
Yeah,
sin bin or blue card.
no, that's right. They had
Right.
the meeting. They had the meeting in March a few weeks ago, and out of that in Scotland, the agenda was we're not interested in blue cards, and they don't appear interested in sin bins. Sin bins work at grassroots level.
Mm.
I've
Right,
seen it.
because I thought that it was they'd taken away the um blue card for like cynical fouls, and I thought they were planning on keeping it just for dissent, but that's
Well,
interesting.
I mean, at grassroots level, the sin bin is only for dissent. And that was, I think, the first problem that they made when they decided to bring it in. They suddenly started to introduce other aspects that then didn't help the process. Whilst I'm talking, by the way, I'm trying to look for the if you go to the IFAB, bear with me. I know I've sent it out today. Sent. Bear with me.
No worries.
Oh, here it is. I should get it. It's part of it. Yeah. I'm just to clarify. Bear with me, and I know we're recording it. Penalty kick, other changes, players equipment, additional permanent concussion. It says, regarding temporary dismissals, brackets, sin bins, the members agreed to study the current guidelines available as an option to some competitions and to consider whether their use could be extended in the future. The guidelines have been rewritten and include some changes agreed at the AGM. The revised guidelines are attached to this circular. Maybe what I'll do is I'll send it to you.
Yeah, no, that would be good. Thank you.
Circular.
Mm.
And then we'll know. At this moment in time, there's no intentions of sin bins being introduced into the Premier League. That's
right.
Very clear.
Do you think it ever will be, and do you think it can be effective if it's used right?
I think so. I think initially I was for sin bins. I'm still for sin bins at grassroots level because of the deterrent that the help it gives referees. I think that the referee at the elite level has greater experience, greater skill sets that should in fact be proactive to prevent the need for a sin bin.
That's brilliant, Keith. Really enjoyed that. Just to end, obviously these referees, they've come under a lot of stick, but they've obviously had to do their due diligence and have had to apply their trade from grassroots all the way up to where they are now, refereeing in the Premier League. Could you just talk us through your journey of going from grassroots level to where you are, where you were? Yeah.
I started in 1960 as a grassroots referee and spent 12 years running around amateur football fields in and around Sheffield and South Yorkshire. I then became a referee on the Northern Premier League, which was semi-professional, and then eventually, after 12 years, became a linesman, assistant referee on the Football League in round about 1972. A couple of years later, I became a referee. And I refereed from that period right the way through to round about 1995. So I spent effectively 23 years approx on the Football League, which, 2 years of which I had an extended career, having reached what was then the retirement age, which was kicked into touch with European legislation. And the aim of that was to retain one or two referees to help the formulation and introduction of the Premier League. So I spent 2 years refereeing on the Premier League. In 81, I became an international referee and spent 10 years as a referee, all under the banner of an amateur in a professional game. The sort of battles that I had was, the good points was I was traveling Europe regularly, Real Madrid, Juventus, traveling the world out in America, Asia, South America, Mexico, officiating. And officiated the semi-final of the Olympic Games in Seoul, the European Championship in opening game in Europe, the centenary game of the Football League. So you get all those benefits. However, throughout that career and throughout my career, I was still refereeing in the local parks. So I would referee an international game on a Wednesday and probably 2 pub teams on a Sunday morning. When I retired from refereeing, I became a match assessor. I became a UEFA, the development manager of the PGMOL. I put the plans forward for the foundation of the PGMOL. And 18 months later, I became the boss of the PGMOL. In the meantime, I was a UEFA expert, referee expert. I helped write the UEFA Referee Convention, which was about referee recruitment, retention, training, education, appointing, and that created a foundation for referees across the 54 countries of UEFA. That convention is still in place. They make the up changes up with it and all that goes with it. When I retired from the PGMOL, I became, for a couple of years, the referee ambassador for the Premier League and travelled a lot, running workshops in Africa, Asia, South America. And some of those referees, one in particular was at the last World Cup. I formed links with Australia and New Zealand. And I helped the MLS set up ProRef, this sort of mirror organization in America operating professional referees. In that period, I had a 6-week spell refereeing on the North American Soccer League as a guest referee. That was enjoyable. I've written several books. You Are the Ref is the one that I work with on Paul Trillian. I'm not trying to sell it, but it's basically a book that uses the pen of the artist, and he draws the incidents and whatever, and I provide the answers.
That's cool.
So we've done several of those. Interestingly, I write for a Chinese magazine.
Interesting.
Which has a 2 million circulation, and I do odd pieces. So there's one. So again, I'm only too happy to help people to learn more about the role of a referee and how the referees can develop their career. And the PGMOL is, along with UEFA, is well advanced in referee education and training.
I just want to go back to you mentioned that you were banned as an amateur when refereeing in the professional game. Was that normal? Or
yeah, before this, that's why I wanted the PGMOL. I mean, look, I was appointed to referee a World Cup game in New Zealand v Australia. I lost my job. I was a sales and marketing director with a good career and good pension. I lost that because of football. I was appointed to referee Stuttgart versus Feyenoord in a UEFA Cup game. And I could only do that game on the basis of being able to get back home for a board meeting. So as a result, I paid £2,000 to charter my own aircraft to get me back at my expense. So, when you went into Europe to referee a European Cup game, you didn't get a match fee.
Okay.
So times have changed, and rightly
Indeed.
so.
Yes. Can you remember your first professional game as a referee? And if so,
Yeah.
what was it like?
I mean, well, it was Stockport County versus Northampton Town. And, I can remember it as though it was yesterday.
What were the emotions? First professional match.
I think that in fairness, I'd had a very good grounding in the Northern Premier League. I was quite fit. I was getting lots of praise. I was very confident, not overconfident, but I was confident that I could deliver. And I think that things happen in your career. I can remember walking off at that game, and the copper at the bottom of the stand saying, "Hey, ref, well done," and that meant quite a lot to me. So yeah, I think that people think that we're all like it's a nightmare of a role, and it's actually very enjoyable. It's not a lonely job because you're members of the Referees Association. You meet on a month. I did. You meet on a monthly basis. You chat about your decisions, your performances, um, and you've got ambition. I work with 1 or 2 referees now. I liaise with them, and they're very ambitious, and I think that's great. It's what I like to see, and I'm only too happy then to pass on some of the shortcuts that they needed to avoid to become hopefully better referees if they want to be. There's aspects that grassroots referees hardly get touch on: body language and presence, and managing conflict. The fitness element side, nutrition. I commissioned Professor Don McLean at Loughborough University to produce a nutrition book specific for referees, and that's still available. Referees want it, they can have it. It's free. It took us. It cost us a bit, but it was worth having.
And I've just got one final question about VAR. Where would you like VAR to be in, say, 3 years' time?
Open, transparent, improved technology, better delivery of performance, and that has to be the aim. And if that means that you have to experiment, and you have to change things and increase the amount of commitment to VAR, fine, but not 3 years. This is months, not years. This is where those people who are running the game must recognize that it's no good sitting there saying everything is working and it's wonderful, because it ain't. It might be working better in other countries, but they have equally, they don't have as many conflict decisions, but then they're not facing 22 cameras at every game, and a game that's transmitted to 211 territories around the world. The Premier League's on the stage. So I want it to help referees. I don't want it to hinder. And here comes the crunch. If they can't get it right in 2 years, bin it.
That's the headline. That's the punchline. Brilliant way to end, Keith. It's been really fascinating.